So this is the second video of academic and technical scientific writing that includes parts B and C. If you have seen part A, then everything from here on in is a little bit self-explanatory in terms of what's going to happen. If you haven't watched the first video yet, and so you're just starting now, basically the first video is about what the difference is between academic writing and the other forms of writing with which you are familiar. The thing is that you probably haven't seen much academic writing up until very recently, and most of the things that you have used as modelling for your writing, journalism, fiction and general non-fiction, are actually very different from what you need to do in academic writing. Very, very different. So please check out part A, the first video, when you have time. So in this video here, parts B and C, we'll talk about how you can do academic writing. So this is why this is adapted from and approach to. And here I've developed over 10 years my own approach to explaining what happens in academic writing when working side by side with people who are putting together papers for publishing, or putting together their doctorate thesis, or doing a first year nursing or physiotherapy or engineering assignment, or third year IT student, etc., trying to get their work into some kind of shape that is academic. And I found that the principles that I'm going to talk about in here are generally very helpful. So in the first video, I gave a background of why we need a specific approach and how academic writing's different from other forms of writing, which is a really important thing to get. It's really important to see that you can't write as you would in a journalistic style or a non-fiction general style or a fiction style as you have learned in high school or in other backgrounds. You just can't do that. You'll do badly in terms of assessment at university. If you do that, you'll be frustrated. You'll have to put so much more effort in for much less effect. Yeah, there are many reasons why you should really adapt. Well, you have to adapt to an academic approach to writing. The good news is that it's actually very simple. So we'll be talking about those principles, and there are 6 of them that I've come up with, and after that we'll talk about what you can do with those, what's next. So these are the principles that I've come up with. If there was something similar out there written by someone else that I knew about, then, and it was well put together and it was from someone who was reliable as a source, then I would be using that as a main source and referencing them, rather than somewhat arrogantly coming up with my own method. However, I haven't found anything quite like what I've put together, and I feel it's of value. Students seem to value it, so they say that it helps them quite a lot, and so here I am basically using myself as a source in this presentation. So forgive me for that, and I hope it's useful for you. So there are basically 2 principles that are the major principles. First one is clarity, and then the other one is accountability. That's come down to number 6 for a reason, because accountability is a given. You have to be accountable. That means you have to use correct sourcing and have a reference list, citations done properly in the correct format. Otherwise, it's plagiarism or extremely sloppy work, which is not acceptable. So accountability is kind of a given, and we've talked about referencing earlier in the course. And of course, logic. The other aspect of accountability is you need to have a logical process. All right, now let's come to clarity. This is the one that everyone struggles with, and I've struggled myself to explain it earlier on in my career. But what I've come up with is that clarity is composed of 4 other major elements. There are other things in there, but the major things are the structure, the accuracy of word choice, for example, the specificity of your word choice. Are your nouns specific or vague? Person versus client or student, or Griffith College student in 1020 QBT semester 2. Now that's much more specific, isn't it? And efficiency. How many words are used to get to your point? These are all very, very important for clarity in academic, scientific and technical writing. Now when we're speaking, the rules are completely different. So even though we have an academic context here, because I'm speaking, I break all of the academic rules. So whatever you do, don't write like I'm talking now. Right, so I'm going to break those down one by one, from clarity through to accountability, and talk about what I'm trying to really say for each of them and how you can achieve those things. Of course, I can't give an absolutely complete explanation of all of them because that would take a very long time. But what I'll ask you to do is keep these in mind. In fact, take a screenshot or use your phone to take a photo of that section from clarity through to accountability. If you can write them on a piece of paper and stick it on your computer screen, on the side of your computer screen, just keep that in mind. If you think, well, which word should I be using here, this one or that one? Well, then look at this. Which one is more accurate? Which one is more specific? If I use this word, am I going to need a whole bunch of other words to sort of explain myself afterwards, which is inefficient? So if you stick those up on the side of your computer monitor or in front of your desk, it might help to guide you as you're writing. Okay, so next we'll be discussing section B and moving on to C later on towards the end. As basic principles, I've found that across almost all university subjects, except journalism, of course, and creative writing, which have different goals. Except those two areas, a basic set of principles can be useful for all academics and all students, in my experience, and I hope it's useful for you. So the first thing is we have 6 principles that I've written down. Clarity, that's the main thing, is to be clear. There are 4 different aspects of that, and then the last thing is to be accountable. So it's to be clear and accountable. Yeah, clear, accountable. Accountable meaning your logic and your referencing and so forth. Now the clear is all about your language choices and your structure and so forth, which is probably much more critical because it's the hardest one to figure out at first. What am I supposed to be writing? So clear, clarity, contains clear structure, accurate choice of words, and predictable also structure, predictable choice of words, specific nouns. So your words have specific meaning, well, your nouns are specific. And efficiency in expression, because if you're rambling on, it's confusing and tiring. Now I'm rambling on here because speaking and spoken communication is challenging to listen to and to take, and I need to take lots of examples and try and make it interesting. I'm probably using a little bit too much of your time, but okay. But you'd avoid doing that in academic writing. And part 6, which is accountability. You can see how I've organized the indents there. Clarity and accountability are the 2 main things, but clarity is the biggest challenge, and that's why I've got these specific ways in which you can be clear. Structure, accuracy, specificity, and efficiency. They're not things that you can just pick and choose from. You actually need to have the structure, the accuracy, the specificity, and the efficiency in everything you do in your writing, as far as my experience goes. Alright, let's have a look at this. So the first thing is structure. Why is it first? Well, it's the key to everything. Structure gives you coherence. It's held together. And structure is relative. What was structural in the 18th century would now seem to be kind of random to us now. And what we write now would not be acceptable back then and will not be acceptable 100 years from now. Having said that, you've got to know what structure you're supposed to use. Thankfully, the structures are provided for you in exemplars and scaffolding documents and also in the literature. If in a tough situation, you're not given a structural outline, that's a really tough call. When they say you need to do these things, we're not going to give you any example to work from, and we're not going to give you any sort of structural basis. That's almost cruel when that happens. And so what you can do is you can go to your tutor and say, look, I really have no idea how I'm supposed to structure this. Do you have any exemplars? Do you have a sort of an outline, or can you help me sort of, I was thinking of doing this, 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 and this. Is that going to work? And they say, oh, well, no, well, you have to put that first. Oh, why do we do that? Well, that's what we do in our field. Okay, what else do I do that I don't know? We need to do this, this. Have you looked at the faculty website? There's a guide there. Is there? I didn't know that. Yeah, just go to this, and they've got the guide there. And so that, have the conversation with the tutor if you can't see any guidance on what structure you're supposed to be using. Now, structure must be as clear as possible. And in order to be clear, it's got to be predictable. Yes, predictable. And being predictable is really important because predictable is easy to understand. To be predictable, you adhere to the conventions of your discipline. It's very specific. Your discipline predictability is going to be a certain thing. If you did that in another discipline, you wouldn't be behaving in a predictable way. So predictability is relative to your discipline. So find out what the rules are for your area. Now, the tools you can use to be as clear as possible and predictable as possible are the overall document layout and structure. What is expected in the document? What do you start with? What are the sections? Where is the appendix? Where's the contents? How many sections are there within the introduction, etc. That's going to vary from field to field. If you have the opportunity or the requirement to do numbered headings and subheadings, that's a golden opportunity because that gives your document instant structure. If you're not allowed to do numbered headings and subheadings, it's really tough to write a document because each paragraph has to work to explain what it's trying to do. If you've got the opportunity to put a numbered heading in there, you can just say, we're doing this, And we'll see an example of that later. Thankfully, numbered headings and subheadings are generally acceptable in most academic writing, unless they're asking you to do something that's a bit more expressive or, like certain types of essays and reflections. But anyway. Okay, so the purpose statement of a paper, or the purpose and scope statements. This is your main opportunity to give something structure. It tells the reader what you're going to do. And the rules of straightforward communication from my father, but also from an engineering tradition, are say what you're going to say it, and then say what you said. So say what you're going to say is your purpose statement. Now, this is what we're doing here with your purpose and scope statement. And the outline, in the case of the report, which is fleshing out each step of what you're going to do. Okay, so that's at document level. You've got the overall structure. You might have numbered headings. And you're going to have an introduction, and you'll have a purpose and scope either at the beginning of the introduction, or you'll have a purpose statement at the end of it, depending on what document structure you're being asked to do. And then you've got your body paragraphs inside your report or your reflection or your essay or whatever it is. The body paragraphs, starting with the topic sentence, will really set up the paragraph well. The topic sentence just says what the paragraph's going to tell us. Now, after the topic sentence, then you should have supporting sentences that support what you're trying to say in the topic sentence. Not just talk about the topic, but you should need to have a topic and a controlling idea. Topic is bananas. Nutritious is the controlling idea. So bananas are nutritious is the point I'm trying to make. If I just say bananas, well, that's not a very focused paragraph, is it? It could be anything. Who likes bananas? Who doesn't eat bananas? No. What I'm trying to say is bananas are nutritious. Now we know what he's going to say. And then I tell you why. So then my supporting sentences should be sequential in some form or logical and make a coherent argument supporting this one here. Don't just do a train of thought, because usually it doesn't do the job. If there are discrete separate points, make them clearly. First point, second point, third point. If there's one large point to be made, and you need to make it through going through some kind of a sequence or a logical sort of trail, do that. But usually there's several supporting points to be made, and you need to make them clear. So, the first reason why blah, blah, blah is, the second reason is blah, blah, blah. Okay. Then at the end of your body paragraphs, it's really good to have a concluding sentence. It goes back to the idea you introduced in the topic sentence, but it adds anything else that we've learned throughout the paragraph. Now, you don't have to do this for every single paragraph, body paragraph. Most writers don't. It's a good habit to do because it shows your teachers, hey, I know how to write, but also it makes it super duper clear. If you're really running up against the word limit, you might have to, cut some corners here and there, which a lot of writers do. However, I can tell you that if you don't have topic sentences, everything suddenly becomes really, really very, very unclear very quickly. So at a bare minimum, every body paragraph should have a topic sentence. And aim to get in a concluding sentence if you can. Now, most people say, I've run out of words for that, and say, well, you know what that is? That's a lack of efficiency in your general expression, and that comes later on in this slideshow. Okay, so topic sentences. And concluding sentences. And then, of course, the other tools are the conventions and requirements of your discipline. Now, that's a tool, because what if there were no conventions? Where there are no conventions, there's nothing for people to hold on to. There's no point of reference. And so whatever you write is going to be pretty confusing. It's going to be really tough. When you've got a convention, you can hold on to that convention. You can write within that convention. It's going to make sense. Now, some composers in classical music, well, I won't say classical because it was Baroque actually, but adhered very strongly to convention, such as Johann Sebastian Bach. And the rules of counterpoint that he used, that's the bass line, by the way. What a genius. And the melody was, but the way those notes fit together, they didn't break any of the rules at the time in music. There was no rule breaking going on there. Mozart came along and started breaking rules all over the place. And people reacted in all sorts of ways. Check out the movie, what is it? Amadeus. There's a wonderful scene where the king is hearing his music for the first time and asks Salieri, "What am I supposed to say? What do I think about this? Can you tell me what I think about this?" Because he didn't even know how to interpret it. So conventions really help us. Now, Mozart went on to create new conventions, but he really had to be an absolute genius and work against it. Now, I'm sure some of you are absolute genii, but what I will say is that, it's a hard slog, and there's a lot of work involved in creating new conventions. So if there are conventions there, you'd start there. And Mozart did write to conventions. It's not like he got rid of the chromatic scale or any of the scales derived from it. He didn't start using, quarter tones, and didn't take a trip to India and go hang out in a commune with a Rajneesh and play a sitar. And he didn't start doing that, did he? No. So he did have many conventions that he adhered to, as did the Beatles. Most of their stuff is 4 beats to the bar, but a lot of it's revolutionary. They added other stuff on top. So most changing of conventions in anything is incremental. Now you have the conventions, and you can start from there. So they're a tool to use. They're not just a set of rules that bind you. They are tools that can help you to write in a way that is easy for people to get. So the next thing is, in a simple paragraph structure, is to see how it actually looks. The first thing would be to have a topic sentence. Now I put T here for topic, CI, and see how Arial's not very helpful here. Arial is a font that looks like CL, doesn't it? Chlorine. But it's C capital I, controlling idea. So my topic is bananas. Controlling idea are nutritious, a verb and something else, in this case an adjective. So bananas are nutritious. Bananas are nutritious. Topic, controlling idea. That's my topic sentence. Okay, great. Okay, so where's my support? Well, the first thing is they've got vitamins A, B, and C. Does that support the idea that they're nutritious? Yes, it does. So that's working. This is called coherence. You know, it all sort of makes sense. Potassium's an important nutrient, and they're low in fat, which suggests also that they're nutritious. Now, if I said here without any kind of you know, word such as however, that they also contained cyanide, that wouldn't really go along with my idea of them being nutritious. So there's fiber and other things in there, I won't go into it. But the idea is that there's a coherence between the idea I've given in the topic sentence, which is bananas are nutritious, and the idea in each supporting sentence. Now at this point you might say, could I use 2 sentences for the vitamins thing? Yeah, you can. And in fact a lot of teachers encourage that. I don't. I actually encourage you to get the idea done in 1 sentence, because when you get an idea done in 1 sentence, the reader knows that's done. But if you get an idea sort of halfway done in your sentence, then you start another sentence and go, well, what I'm trying to tell you is blah, 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 blah. Then comes another sentence and the reader's thinking, have we finished the last one? So it's up to you really, but I prefer to try and I'd rather have slightly longer sentences, more complex sentences that get to the end of the idea and then it's done. I like to use markers too. The first nutritive aspect of bananas is their vitamin content, but bananas containing vitamins A, B, and C, which are very good for this, 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 and this. The second nutritive aspect of bananas is their potassium content, which is important because blah, 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 blah. That's one way of doing it. Using signal words of the first, the second, the third. It's really helpful. It's simplistic, but if you've got 3 points to make, why not say the first, the second, the third, or one reason, another reason, the third reason, one example of, another example of. Yeah? It's crazy not to do it if you've got 3 examples, say the first example, the second, and the third. I mean, it just makes sense. Okay, so there you've got low in fat being my third point. So after that, you need a concluding sentence, which is bananas are healthy, they contain vitamins, potassium, and they're low in fat. So I've gone back to my original idea and added the development from the paragraph. Very simple. That's okay. Simple is often a brilliant thing. So it's really good if you sort of start with something simple, and then you can work from that. It's starting to rain. Okay. So here is the paragraph. This is how it would look. Bananas nutritious. That's my topic sentence. Notice there's no in-text reference there. That's because I own this paragraph. If you put an in-text reference there, whose paragraph is this anyway? Now, plenty of people have said that bananas are nutritious. Well, if that's the case, then I don't even need to write this paragraph. You get it? This paragraph would suddenly just become one very short sentence. Bananas are nutritious. Jones, 75. Done. We don't need to write this paragraph. You get it? So, do you really need to write the paragraph? You need to write the paragraph? Well, it's your paragraph. In which case, the topic sentence is yours, and it won't need a citation. The supporting sentence as well. Vitamins A, B, and C. Well, I've supported that with a paper by Singh, which I made up. And the necessity for basic health and chronic disease, which is Peters 2017, which I also made up. So for each of the sentences, you can see is 1 point. So the first sentence in support runs from they down to here. And then the second one runs down to here. The third one runs down to here, and you're doing snakes and ladders. Okay, so then I've also raised another sort of contentious point about fructose content. So I've said, although fructose content also needs to be considered in this context. So there's a little bit of a however, a concession in there. Anyway, it can be concluded overall that while they have high fructose, so I've just added that little bit in there to show that you can do that. Overall, blah, 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 and I could put the details in because they contain X, Y, and Z. Alright, so this is all made up stuff, but that's how these paragraphs can look. So it's quite possible to have more complexity in a paragraph, obviously. So the same paragraph here, bananas are nutritious, vitamins, potassium, low in fat, and then bananas are good for health. However, life is rarely that simple, and there's often a counterpoint. So here's the counterpoint. Bananas can have negative health effects because of they're high in fructose and starch. They also have high oxalic acid when unripe. And for some people who are allergic to oxalic acid, like I am, it can cause a pretty bad reaction. You know, your throat can swell up, and you lie on the ground and can't breathe anymore. So you can include a counterpoint in this way. This counterpoint has been sort of seen in a few different ways, but I like to see it as a second topic sentence. I feel it is much clearer to think of it like that. This here, however, bananas can have negative health effects. It's in the same paragraph, but it's the second topic sentence because you're raising a new topic. You hadn't raised this before. You hadn't talked about the negative health effects. So I get to the end of my supporting points for one argument or one idea, and then I can have a short topic sentence for another contrasting idea, and then the concluding sentence down the bottom, here we have it here, it rounds it all off. It rounds off the first argument and the second. Now this is good for efficiency because instead of having one whole paragraph about bananas being nutritious and then a whole new paragraph about them not being nutritious, I can sort of cram it in together so I don't have to have two concluding sentences. So I save a number of words there, and also I keep that whole topic of nutrition and, you know, nutritious, nutritively problematic areas all in one paragraph, which is neat, and the human brain likes neat when it's reading. So document structure is very important. Here's a classic essay structure. You've got an introduction. It'll have background statements. Now, it's important in the background statements, what are the main nouns, the main topics, and how are they important or significant, and how are they connected. That's what you're doing in the background statements. Plenty of people have told you, start general, go specific, start with the pyramid that's upside down. Okay, great, yeah, but what do you actually write about? And so many times people are writing about irrelevant blah, blah, blah. What you should be writing is what you're going to talk about and why it's significant. Why are we talking about this? What are we talking about and why? Yeah. So the what and the significance of those things. Then you have a thesis or a position statement. Bananas are an important resource for humankind. Da, da, da. Or you have it written as a purpose statement. The difference with purpose statement is basically this essay will, this report will. And it usually will be investigate or look into or so forth. Now, if it's an essay, or particularly an argumentative essay, you can still use a purpose statement. And I like to use a purpose statement because you can say this essay will argue that blah, blah, blah. We'll discuss that. But if it's an argumentative essay, I'd use argue that. The reason I like to do that, you don't have to, but the reason I like to do that is as soon as I say this essay, what I'm doing is saying, hey everyone, here's my purpose / position thesis statement. Here it is. It's easy to see. If I just write bananas are an important resource for mankind, that could actually be part of my backgrounding. Yeah? And then the reader goes, oh, is that the point you're making? Or is that background info? I don't know. What's going on? So to tell the reader, hey, this is what I'm going to write about, I really like to use this essay will. One colleague, a teacher colleague, has played devil's advocate on this and said, well, an essay can't do anything. An essay can't argue anything. And I say, yeah, you're right, but I'm allowed to get away with it and everyone else is allowed to get away with it. It's a convention. So unless you're told you can't do that by someone who really, really knows what they're talking about, then you can do it. Who knows what they're talking about? Well, if they're someone who's an academic in your field. So the body paragraphs have your topic sentences, your supporting sentences, SS, and your concluding sentences. And you do the same for body paragraph 1, 2, and 3. And then your conclusion returns to your main thesis or purpose statement and then repeats the points, the ideas you've come up with in paragraph 1, 2, and 3 and ties it all together. That's an essay structure. Why didn't they tell me that in high school? I don't know. But yeah, that's how you structure an essay. Now, how would you structure a report? Now, reports, there's a lot more in them, and there's many headings. This is what you would typically do for a report such as the one you need to do for this course, which requires numbered headings if you look at the criteria. So if you look at this, you'll see that there is preliminary matter, and then there's the body in the middle, and then the box down the bottom, which is the end matter. That's what's required. If you've read the task, you'll see that. So that's typical of most reports in your field, and that's why we're getting you to do this. We're not doing this just for kicks. We're doing this because we've talked with the engineering department and with the health sciences department and with the general sciences department, the IT department, and they want you to know how to write reports. Yeah. Now, you'll go into second year if you go into uni, and you'll have maybe a little bit more backgrounding than some of the exiting first years. So it's a little bit of an advantage if you put a bit of effort into this. Plus, you'll need to do this in industry. In industry, you write reports. Any of you who thought, I'm going to do engineering because I don't have to deal with words because I hate writing and talking to people, well, ha, 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 ha. Actually, you're going to do more writing than anyone else. My dad spent most of his life writing. He's an engineer. Yeah, he kicked around aeroplanes for quite a while, but yeah, most of his time was in an office writing about it. So you need to get good at writing reports, and if it's a painful process for you, you're never going to enjoy your career. So learn how to do it well and efficiently, and it'll be fun. All right, so if you look at this structure, you've got an introduction, and there's purpose and scope, background, and then the background's going to be all of the backgrounding ideas. So there's going to be some subheadings, 1.2.1, 1.2.2, and then the report outline, and that's a more detailed description of what the report's going to do. So the purpose and scope will be along the lines of this report aims to do this, and in this kind of context, you know. Whereas report outline is going to say this report will first do this, then do this, then do this, do this, doing this, finding this, and then concluding this and giving recommendations on this. Yeah? Just like that. And you're going to be listing verbs. Can I use 3 sentences? You can if you want, but there's a word limit. Yeah. So how do we avoid using 3 sentences? This report will do this, comma, do this, do this, do this, comma, do this. Just keep going. Do this, it'll do this, and do this. How many can I put there? Surely that sentence is too long. Wait, my English teacher from year 8 said my sentences were too long. Your English teacher can't hurt you now. Don't worry. It's okay. You're safe. Because you can put as many verbs as you want, as long as someone reads it and they can get to the end of the sentence in one piece. Yeah. And the headings are there to help you. With the headings there, it makes everything just that much easier. So a slightly stretchy sentence is okay. So particularly in that introduction, there's going to be slightly longer, stretchier sentences in the report outline and in the purpose and scope, because they've got to cover everything. And it's really nice if you can do it in 1 sentence. You can do it in 2. There's a number of reasons I've mentioned before that I tend not to. Okay, so in the findings section, in the discussion and so forth, you're going to have your heading, and then you're going to have underneath that 1 or more paragraphs, each of which will have a TS, a topic sentence, and then support, points 1, 2, and some references for those support. Yeah. So in your planning, you develop your structure. Then when you go to write, you can write it, you know, with your brain half switched off, which it will be by the end of the week. You'll be exhausted just trying to get this thing done. If you've got a good report plan, which you should do for every report, you'll be able to just look at the plan and go, oh, okay, I'm going to write paragraph, I'm going to write 1.1, and then I'm going to go and have a beer, or I'm going to go and have a coffee, or I'm going to go meet my friends, I'm going to go to the gym, or go for a run, or go for a swim. Yeah, that's what's great about writing reports in the numbered heading style, is you can just go, and you can do this with the other papers too if you're organized. You plan out what you're going to do. Right, okay, so what have I got to do in this paragraph? 1.1.2, what am I writing about? There's my heading. Okay, does that work? I talked to my tutor about that and they said that'll work. Have I planned what support I'm putting in there? Right, okay, I'm really sleepy, but I want to go out for a run, so I'm just going to do it. Tappity, 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 tap. Write that paragraph and pshaw, you're out of here. Okay, so it's a bit of a roughish kind of paragraph. It's not perfect, but it's going to be much closer to a final draft than just drafting without any planning and any headings. I can tell you that. And when you get really good at it, you know, you write one draft, proofread it, and you find, well, actually, that's good to go, rather than doing multiple drafts. Some people are big fans of multiple drafts. Personally, I don't have time. Life's short. So I prefer to plan it well and execute, and I find that it uses a lot less time. I hope that when you do it, it helps you too. There's a very important reason why we've asked you to plan this paper. All right. So the next aspect of clarity is accuracy. The third aspect, accuracy. You've got to be accurate in your information, obviously, but in your word choice. Let's have a look. Every word has certain denotation and connotation that makes it slightly different from every other word. People might try and tell you that two words have the same meaning. They're wrong. If they did, one would be obsolete and would have disappeared. And quite a few words have disappeared. So every word has a slightly different meaning, and that meaning allows us to use it. Slight difference of meaning allows us to use it for its intended meaning in a slightly different way from another one. For example, wardrobe, closet. Which one definitely has clothes? Yeah, wardrobe, protector of your robes. Yeah, closet. Well, I could have brooms and mops in it, couldn't it? Cupboard. Can you put your clothes in a cupboard? No, you put cups in a cupboard, but they've all got this swinging door. Aren't they all the same thing? No, they're not. So what's a commode? That's with the drawers. Or is it a dresser? Well, they're all a little bit different. And it's the same with every word. You know, every word's got its own specific purpose. So you've got to choose the right one. Synonyms for nouns. This was something you were really encouraged to do in high school. They said, find synonyms. Don't use the same word twice. What they wanted you to do was expand your vocabulary and stop sounding like a robot. Okay? They wanted you to expand your vocabulary. It was a vocabulary tool. They also wanted you to show how flexible you were in your ability to use the language. And they do this for anyone who's learning English as a second language. So any of your English second language learners there, you'll be thinking, but wait, they told me synonyms are important, and I did IELTS. And for the IELTS test, they really, really want you to use that. Yeah, variety in language. Yeah, okay, but not in academic and technical language. In fact, synonyms are your enemy. Because once you've said the word cloud, for example, let's say cumulonimbus. You know, there's convection, you know, heat coming off the land with moisture going up. The moisture and the heat go up high and they cool down, and so they form clouds. And on a very hot day, there'll be a lot of heat traveling up, and they'll form the big, big, fluffy cumulonimbus clouds that might produce heavy rain, lightning, hail, or they might just sit there looking fluffy and giving turbulence to passing aircraft. Or sucking birds up into the sky, which is really funny. So, cumulonimbus clouds. Can you call it something else? Go on, try. A cumulonimbus cloud is a cumulonimbus cloud. But I want to make it interesting. My teacher said, find a synonym. Can you see? In scientific, academic, and technical writing, you don't use synonyms, except for the connecting words. So, because you can use as, yeah, accordingly, due to, etc., etc. One cause of, for example. So you should be using synonyms in your connecting language, not in your key nouns. Okay, the other thing about accuracy is for any key idea, most of the nouns in your writing are going to be key ideas, but most specifically for the ones that you're talking about, like a technology that you're going to write about, or the group of students that you're discussing in your final, or the discipline you're discussing in your final report. You find the most appropriate term and you use it exactly the same way throughout the paper. For example, if I'm writing about virtual reality, the term virtual reality will appear like 100 times. Yeah? And that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. You need that predictability. You can't go mucking around with that. Reality that is virtual? No, it's virtual reality. If you get sick of writing virtual reality, just put in brackets VR and then write VR through the whole paper. But you've got to keep using VR. So consistency is really important. It's an important part of accuracy. All right. Very different from journalism and very different from fiction and what you were taught in high school. So let's have a look at the next thing, which is specificity, being specific, which sounds like being Pacific. And you can be Pacific if you just head 100 meters over there and jump in. That's fine. You can be Pacific all you like. But you also need to be specific. To be specific, you need to be able to go from a fricative to a plosive, which is not always easy if English is not your first language, but here it is, specific. And to be specific, you need to do it in your nouns. If I just say cat, you're thinking, cat? Whose cat? What color cat? Cat where? Yeah. Are we talking big cat, domestic cat, feral cat? So you need to be specific. Let's have a look at an example. Person. Is that specific? Well, it's more specific than being or organism. Organism, person. Okay, so we've got person, right? So many people are using the term person, thinking that they're being fairly specific. But, well, hang on. Let's have a look at being specific when we relate to person. If we're talking in a business sense, you could talk about a consumer. So a consumer is a buyer of products. What about a person who buys your product? That person's going to be a, you got it, customer. Okay. What if someone buys your service? They pay for your services. You're a lawyer, an accountant, or maybe you've got a consultancy in IT or engineering or science in the future. That's right, the person is a client. Is the client the same as a customer? No, and that's part of accuracy. Yeah, it's strongly linked, specificity with accuracy, because a customer is someone who comes to buy things from your shop, whereas a client, or from your online store, whereas a client is someone who buys your professional services. What if someone is paying for or attending your classes? They are a student. Now, what's the difference between a student and a learner? Same? I know many people in education who use the same term, student and learner, in the same paper, and I've done it many times, but it's not really very good, because a student is a member of an educational organisation who's learning within an organised structure, an institution, whereas a learner is anyone who happens to be learning, which is every single human being on the planet, because humans learn as part of their nature. So you could be a language learner but not attend any kind of classes. And that's very common. Many people do learn a language by not attending classes. My kids are Japanese learners. Actually, they are attending classes now, but they learn most of it from their mum anyway. So there we have it. So let's be more specific. Student. Well, student. Who do we really mean? A tertiary education student. That's more specific. So someone who's either in TAFE or uni or something like that. But what country? You know? All right, how about student of Griffith College? Is this getting more specific? Yes, it is. And you guys, what are you? Students of Griffith College, the 1020 QBT course in trimester 2, 2020, for example. And people who see this next semester, well, tough luck, you miss out. It was only for these people now. Well, you guys will be the same, but you just change one part of the variable. So if you are watching this video in 2022, you just change the 0 at the end to a 2, and whatever is in T2, you change it to trimester 1 or 2 or 3, and then that's suddenly you. So what's great about specificity is that actually only needs little adjustments to parts of it to refer to different groups. It's the same as any variable. Yeah, it can be adjusted. Let's have a look at health aspects. Someone who pays for or receives a health service is a patient. That's right. A person who delivers that service is a health practitioner, correct? And you could have, for example, a physiotherapist. We could have a physiotherapist in their 4th year of practice, which is the kind of particular variable that might be discussed in a study, such as a survey was conducted of physiotherapists in their 4th year of practice to ask how they felt they had adjusted to the requirements of the patient-practitioner interaction. That's what you'll get in science. And throughout the whole document, they're going to have to be called physiotherapists in their 4th year of practice. So you might often come up with acronyms and so forth. That's what you get, so many acronyms. You don't use acronyms because they sound smart. You use acronyms because it's a smart thing to do. You don't use big words because they sound smart. You use them because it's the right word in that place. Practitioner, you don't use because it's a clever sounding big word with 4 syllables. You use it because it's the best way of describing someone. Now, banana versus Musa acuminata. Which one is more specific? Well, there are various species of bananas, right? One of them is Musa acuminata. Now, if we're talking about Musa acuminata, we're going to talk about certain pests and diseases, certain growth habits, certain production rates, blah, 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 certain needs in terms of cultivation. Whereas if we're talking about bananas, well, what actually are we talking about? So most of the time, banana production would only be used in a vague introduction, and then they'd talk about specifically Musa acuminata or another banana, and or they talk about a number of them in that document. So more often than not, in anything technical related to agriculture, they're going to be using the Latin names for plants, etc., etc. So being specific. The next thing is 5, the next aspect of clarity, is efficiency. Now, I've talked a lot in this video, not particularly efficient, but I'm trying to introduce a whole new way of looking at academic writing, so give me a break, hey? So, what is efficiency? Efficiency is trying to get your idea across as efficiently as possible, as much of your idea and information as you can. The first rule is try and get the idea down in one sentence, or even better, in one phrase, half a sentence, one clause. Not even half a sentence, it could be 1/3. Or even better, in one little noun phrase. So you could actually turn a sentence into maybe a clause, or maybe into just one little noun. So bananas are popular is a sentence, or it could be a clause. You could make it the popularity of bananas. Now you might say, how's that more efficient? Well, it's more efficient because then I can just add another verb and then another noun. And that actually makes things more efficient in the end. Right, so getting one idea across in a sentence or less is a really good thing. What I really want you to avoid is to use more than one sentence for an idea. For example, yeah, you can do it when you're speaking, and you have to do it when you're speaking, but you shouldn't do it when you're writing. For example, or in other words, traps. You've got a word limit. There's a reason why you have a word limit. We need you to learn how to be concise with information, because that is how you need to communicate when you're writing. There's no way around it. There's no compromise there. There's no give, no flex at all. You've got to be efficient. You've got the word limit. You've got to stick to it. And that starts 5-10 weeks ago. Okay, so if you have an idea and you write it down and then you find yourself writing in other words, well, do you need to explain this again? Why? What did you miss out on? Well, whatever you missed out on, make sure is in that sentence. Whatever's unnecessary, you get rid of. You just get to the nitty-gritty and then move to the next idea. Again, for example, we don't need examples. And if you've been asked to give examples, then you would say, one example of this is this, blah, 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 blah. But for example is basically saying, well, my idea wasn't explained very well, so I think I'm just going to throw examples at you until you get it, which is just downright rude, really, isn't it? Yeah, so get the idea across. You shouldn't be using in other words or for example. It just shows that you didn't do it right the first time. Not very professional. Yeah? Okay. How do we do this? There's 2 main tricks. Using noun phrases. You can get a whole concept, a sentence, or an idea, even a whole paragraph. You can even summarize a whole person's paper down into one little string of words, a noun phrase. For example, the popularity of bananas. So just say a guy called McGuinness wrote oceans and oceans of papers on how bananas are popular. Okay. This is how I do it. The popularity of bananas, McGuinness, years, blah, 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 blah. is well documented, and blah 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 blah. And go on with another point. Well, the well-documented popularity of bananas, McGuinness in the years, has been a major factor in their wide establishment as a cultivated item. Someone else. So I've actually got these two ideas in this sentence. Instead of spending 2 or 3 sentences saying, well, bananas are quite popular, McGuinness found in this year that it was popular, and then some people disagreed with him, and he said, yeah, well, they are popular, see what I mean? You don't muck about. And you can get it down to a noun phrase, the popularity of bananas. And that's a whole person's career worth of work. You see where I'm going with this? Squeeze things down in little noun phrases. Okay. So, remove all the unnecessary repeated nouns by using verbs or modifiers in lists, amongst other linguistic tricks. Let's have a look at 2 examples. The noun phrase, which I just mentioned, and then removing the repetition. First, a noun phrase, if I can get the mouse to work. Okay, so using a noun phrase. People like the colour of bananas. Okay. They also like the low price of bananas and their taste. So what's happening here, we've got people repeated, but also we've got this liking. They like this, they like the colour, they like the price and their taste. So like, well, why don't we turn like into a noun? Popularity. So the popularity of bananas' colour, bananas should actually have a plural of possessive, that's good. The popularity of bananas' colour, low price and taste. Instead of people like the colour of bananas, they also like the low price of bananas and their taste. How many words are we saving? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. 16 against 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 versus 16. So that's a saving of, oh, well, 35%. Bang! And you can do that sentence after sentence. So when everyone else has hit the word limit, you've still got plenty in the tank. You can fit more information in before you hit your word limit, and that's how you get high distinctions. Okay, so the second part of this short paragraph, because of this, bananas are cultivated extensively. So because of this has led to extensive cultivation. Yeah. Their extensive cultivation, I should really include their as part of that noun. Their extensive cultivation. So 4 words down to 3. Doesn't look like much, but 4 words down to 3 is a saving of 25%. I'd take 25% any day. Alright, next thing, removing unnecessary repeated nouns by using the verb and a modifier in a list, or the verbs and modifiers in lists. So here's an inefficient example. My friend sleeps in a tree. He also eats leaves. It should also be noted that he enjoys sleeping in the tree. He enjoys it. Okay, my friend sleeps in a tree, comma, eats leaves and enjoys it. Yeah, so what we've done here is my friend, the subject, because my friend kept coming up. My friend, he, and then he. So those keep coming up, so I'll just make those the subject of one sentence instead of having 3 sentences. Yeah, so if you've got a person or a thing that keeps popping up, we'll make them the subject and then tie all the verbs to them, or the modifiers, the nouns, the adjectives or the adverbs to them. So my friend sleeps in a tree, eats leaves, and enjoys it. So we've got verb, verb, and verb. And you could go verb, 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 and verb. Yeah, you're allowed to do that as long as people can read it and get it. Now another option is to muck about by making adjectives. My friend is a tree sleeping, leaf eating, blah, I don't know, whatever. Alright, so subject, adjective, comma, adjective, and adjective. You could do it with adverbs as well. You know. Adverbs being, you know, for example, sleepily, yeah, etc. So that's another major way of getting efficiencies that academics often use. The most important aspect of efficiency is don't put anything in that doesn't need to be there. No need to be interesting or entertaining. any extra phrases, anything that you think's nice to put in there because it sounds good, it doesn't, ditch it. Okay. The next thing to think about is the last of our principles, number 6, accountability. Now, accountability is in use of sources and referencing, but also in logic. The first of these, sources and referencing. So you need to have in-text citations of the sources you're using and to have correctly formatted reference lists in the specified referencing system for your discipline, which might be APA 7 or IEEE or something else in future. Most likely either of those. In-text citations are needed when you have background statements in the introduction section or paragraph. So you don't need an in-text citation for your purpose statement, but you need it for the backgrounding. You can't just pull information out of nowhere. So generally you'll see every background statement has in-text citations to support these ideas because they're sort of background facts. They have to come from somewhere. You also need them for supporting sentences in the body paragraph. You have your topic, sentence, that's yours, but then you have your supporting sentences, also yours, but they've got to have in-text citations to support what you're arguing there. Whenever you have something like a definition, it's got to have an in-text citation. It should be a direct citation, a direct quote. Okay. And then, of course, there are diagrams. If you put diagrams in there that you have not made yourself, you need to put in-text citations for there. If you've changed some diagram, removing sort of unnecessary confusing information that wasn't really relevant, what you've done is adapted. So you need to say in brackets adapted from, and then you say the author and the date and the page, obviously. So you don't normally need in-text citations for the purpose and scope, or the purpose statement, thesis or position statements, report outline, research questions, or any other statements of what your paper will do. In fact, you would never see an in-text citation in those. And if there is one there, what's going on? It's very confusing. We think, well, hang on, is that what you're going to do or what someone else has already done? Okay, so it's really important where you put in-text citations and where you do not. The other place you won't use in-text citations is in topic sentences or concluding sentences in body paragraphs. Now, this is not a strict rule. It's broken all the time. I break it sometimes. But you have to be really careful when you do that. It's something that you really want to think about when you're doing it, because when you put an in-text citation in there, you're losing a bit of voice and ownership of that statement there, and so the reader might be thinking, yeah, okay, is this you sort of developing your point here? Is this the point you're trying to make? All right. Conclusions. Generally, when you're saying the conclusions of your paper, you don't need to refer to anyone else because you're concluding from what you've established above. Sometimes in conclusion, you might note additional information that's relevant that hadn't come up earlier that should also be considered. You know, that then you might use an in-text citation. You might see that happen sometimes, but generally as a principle, you don't need to do it. Unless, you know, you do cite and study from somewhere, in which case you need to give a citation for it. Recommendations, again, they're your recommendations. They were your conclusions, now these are your recommendations. There's no real need to do that, to cite another source. However, if you wanted to say the recommendations of this report are to do this, 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 and this is in line with, or this corroborates with previous reports by so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so, citation. Yeah, okay, cool, that's fine. But your recommendations are yours. Your conclusions are yours. Your topic sentence is yours. Your concluding sentence is yours. So you don't need any in-text citations. And again, purpose and scope, purpose statement, thesis position, none of that should ever have an in-text citation. Okay, so accountability must be in background statements, supporting sentences, definitions, diagrams, and so forth, and is generally not in the other ones I've given below there. Do you need an in-text reference for every supporting sentence? No. if you're writing something that's drawing connections between things or showing the logical connection between ideas, you know, or saying where things might go, particularly if you're using hedging language, would, might be, could, appear to be, you know, that you're saying you're theorizing, you're proposing an idea, and then you don't need to have any text citation, for example. And when you're developing your own ideas by logic, you don't necessarily need to cite someone else. Okay. So, of course, your accountability is also the logic you use. So you can't just write something that doesn't make any sense. So it has to be logical. What is logic? There's two types of logic. Deductive logic. Deductive logic is typical of what we like to see in writing in the 20th and 21st centuries. You make a statement, you test and support it with observations, and then you return to that and say to what degree you really think it's true. Inductive is the logical system where you don't make any statement of what you're trying to say at the beginning. You just sort of look at examples and look at situations and analyze them and then devise later on what they mean. In mathematics, you have n plus 1, all of that, inductive logic. Yeah? Inductive is not often applied, but can be sometimes in reflection. You know, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. This might mean blah, blah, blah. Now, you can just check with your teacher before you do it because it's not unconventional, but it's something you want to check on. Can I use inductive logic in this paper, for example? Okay, so whichever logic system you're allowed to use, usually deductive, at times possibly inductive, you must make sure that it actually works in a coherent fashion. So the logical approach is determined largely by what your teacher, lecturer, or your field, the criterion of what you're doing, requires. The other things are whenever you make a statement, they need to be clearly supported. You can't sort of do it in some kind of vague way. So don't waste your words on other stuff, being interesting or anything like that. Focus on supporting your points. Move on. So, to conclude, this is one approach that I have sort of recommended to people to use and has been helpful at times. Usually partially I show them just one part of it and then later on I show them the whole thing. And generally people say, that's really useful. That's great. Really good. This is helping me. It might help you. If it doesn't help you, I hope I haven't used up too much of your time. But you might find that when you go to apply some of these things, it might start to make sense. There are other ways of improving your academic writing and other ways of learning about it. Maybe you'll apply this diligently. In 2 years, you'll throw it to the side when you find something else. Whatever you need to do. What I do know is that people have applied this when being published, which is probably the extreme end, when putting together PowerPoints to present to classes, putting conference papers together, or when handing in a first-year assignment. So as far as I know, it has wide application, and I hope it's useful for you. So what can you use this for? What do we do now? I'd like you to think about the following things. Why have we asked you to give us a plan of your report rather than a draft? We're trying to get you to develop your structure. In developing an outline plan for your report, should you start by writing sentences about detailed points, or by deciding the purpose and scope, and then the main headings, and then working into subheadings? Well, you know the answer to that. You've got to get your structure down. You've got to start with a purpose and scope and get your basic structure down of what you think you'll do. Then as you start reading and writing ideas down, you might change and alter that to fit what you've learned. But you've got to start with some kind of structure. So when do you write your topic sentences? It's a good question. For me, I like to put my headings in and then hit the topic sentences as soon as possible. I can always change them later, but writing topic sentences is something I'm very comfortable with. I would recommend you do them as soon as you have any idea of what you want to write in the paragraph, because it will help you to focus on what you're trying to say in the paragraph. When you go to write your topic sentence, sometimes you find like, I want to say, that's not what I want to say. I want to say this, that's not quite right, which is a good thing, because then you figure out, hang on. I haven't got, no, this is not what I'm trying to say at all. I'm trying to say this, yeah? And it helps you to focus on what you're actually trying to achieve in the paragraph. And then when you go and do your reading and you find more information, you know exactly what you're looking for. Okay, for the article notes / summaries, your teacher might have asked you to write a short summary paragraph, or they might have asked you, as I have, to write things in point form notes, which I feel is a bit easier for me and you to look at together and understand. But you know, every teacher and every student has a different approach. I've asked for notes. So what structure is more appropriate and why? Just writing things as a train of thought, well, I read this article and this is kind of what it's about. Just write a few more sentences in here. Right, next one. Or a systematic covering of certain points structured consistently with your other article notes and summaries. What do you think? Okay, when writing about your discipline, the target group of studies, emerging technology, the skills students will have, should you be using interesting synonyms each time, or should you be using one term consistently throughout your paper? Hint, these are scientific variables. So a variable is X, you call it X, right? It's X, just X, you don't change that. All right, there you go. So that sort of brings things to a close. I hope this has been useful for you. Good luck in your writing journey. For many of you, particularly from the same sort of education background for me, writing in a technical sense is very intimidating because we were never really shown in high school how to do a technical thing. In fact, we were never shown any technical papers. But we were shown how to do basic scientific method. Remember how you did in chemistry? Aim, method, results. Well, there's a convention right there, okay? So it's just like doing that. Here we're doing things with a little bit more complexity. If you feel overwhelmed, that's why we've given you a very specific sort of structure with numbered headings to follow in this report. And this report is a trial by fire. The report you have to do for 1020 QBT really is a trial by fire. In ski, snowboard terms, you're going down a black run to start. The thing is that we're right next to you, and we've probably got you on a rope or something. Yeah, we're going to look at your plan next week, and actually it'll be this week, if you, depending on when you're watching this video, and we will be helping you as much as we can to get the structure right. Once you've got that structural outline right, it's actually pretty straightforward to write. Just don't wander. Just like when you're on a black run, you don't go wandering off between the trees. You're going to hit a pine tree and get killed, yeah? Anyone who's tried snowboarding or skiing, you don't go wandering off trail on a black run. You go exactly where you're supposed to go, straight down the trail. So you make yourself a trail and you follow it, and that's what the plan's about. So how much does this approach suit you? What other approaches are available that you could use to do this job? And what other sources of information, guidance, criteria, and examples do you have to refer to? So that's what you need to do, is go out and find those things. You might be comfortable in the way you write, in the context you've had to write up until now. You might find you try to apply that here with mixed success at university. Stepping outside your comfort zone to write technically isn't always easy, particularly if you've been successful in writing in a creative way in the past. How many of you have procrastinated until the night before, gone out with your friends, come home at 2, written an essay overnight, woken up, finished it, slept an hour, taken it into school, given it to your teacher, and got a distinction / an A? It's happened before, right? Well, it's not high school anymore. That kind of writing is not going to pass muster here at university. No way, because it's all about being methodical, not inspired. It's not about talent. It's just about going through the motions of what's required. Now, sounds boring. there's a very good reason why I chose what I'm wearing right now to do today's mini lecture. I'm wearing a very standard white shirt, doesn't have any cuff link, doesn't have the buttons I like on the collar. Tie is flat brown. Boring. But it does the job. It doesn't mean I'm boring. Or maybe I am. But this does the job. I could choose something else that does the job. And it's a little bit slightly more interesting, so you can have a little bit of colour in your writing at times. And I know academics do sneak that in. They might sneak in the French Connection UK purple tie, slightly more interesting. Or something formal, but at least not as boring as brown. Or they might take it a bit further and think, I might wear this genuine 1970s cravat. Okay, alright, getting a little bit wild here. Well, why not just go straight to tie elephants? I like elephants, you like elephants. This is getting slightly to the point of distraction, particularly if we start getting even wilder with our ties. And why don't we just go the whole hog? I could wear this vintage German-made 1970s motorcycle jacket, which is a little bit mouldy. That wouldn't be distracting, would it? Or I could wear this smelly old Billabong steamer wetsuit when I do this. That would be exciting. Maybe even for these lectures that could make things a bit more fun, because what I'm trying to do is be engaging, and perhaps I could be a little bit more engaging, but the point I'm trying to make is that being engaging is not what you're trying to do with academic writing. You've already got the reader's attention. The reader is not there because they want to be there. They're there because they have to be there. So you've got to get the job done, get out of their way. No amount of fancy get-up or cute ties. You know, what I mean is clever language, cute language, entertaining language, lyrical, expressive language. That just makes it worse. That just prolongs the pain that the reader has to go through to get the information. They just want the information. That's all they want from you. Just give them the information. Do the job and go. And they'll be happy. You'll be happy. Yeah. Now, sometimes you could give the information wearing a purple tie. You could sneak something in. Yeah. But the main point is you don't want anything to affect your efficiency and clarity. So, for clarity, you need to have the right structure. You've got to have accurate choice of words. You've got to be specific. And you've got to be efficient. So there's no real room for mucking about with being interesting or fancy. Of course, you've got to be accountable too. Focusing on all of these things, you'll do well, and the people who read your papers will be happy. They'll get the information they need. I'm referring to myself because this is derived from my own ideas. It's poor form to refer to yourself, but this comes from nowhere else but me. There are other books out there on academic writing. Just at my discretion, I have ignored all of them because my ideas are kind of antithetic to some of the ideas that are out there. So I felt that it's better to just let them have their stage and I'll have mine. I hope this is useful for you, and I wish you, not luck, I wish you good fortune in your academic writing adventures from now on. And there it is in IEEE.